I see nobody. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, Father Fish, I'm honored. And David, thank you, my friend. No, we're not going to be singing any 80s tunes. Can you guys hear us well?
Oh, there we are.
Father and David, can you guys hear us fine?
Hey, Father Fish.
They're signed in, but they're not listening to us.
I think David's requesting a song.
Yeah. See what happens here. This drives me crazy. Every live stream when I'm on the road is always an issue of one or another.
Well, can't be easy.
When we get to the point that all of a sudden we sign in for a live stream and there's 100 people waiting, then I'll be excited.
Hey, it's 6 o'clock.
There we go.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Drinking some of the pride of Saskatchewan. It's not very good.
The stuff was made in Winnipeg.
Well, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Father. All right, gentlemen. I'm sure other people will sign in. It always makes me nervous when I do these live streams when I'm on the road. As you guys can tell, I'm in my hotel room. And when I'm on the road, I have unlimited internet. So I always try to take advantage of these live streams and get some really cool guests for you guys. So this time here, when I scheduled this one, because when I schedule it with StreamYards, it always wants to schedule it based on Central Time, Standard Time, and all those different things. Hi, Matt. Hi, all natural. And the problem being Saskatchewan, where I am right now for work, they don't follow any of that. They're like an enigma in the time zone. Oh, Captain Nickelback's in the house. Nice to see you, Josh. But so I scheduled this one. So where I'm at right now, it's only 5 o'clock. Kyle's at home in Manitoba, and it's 6 o'clock. And where most of you are coming in from, it is 7 o'clock. So thank you for showing up. I'm assuming some other live streams are probably going on right now. Probably somebody bigger. Usually what happens. So what's been going on at home? I was away all last week. As you guys know, there was no live stream last week. I was away camping with the family. It was absolutely a wonderful time. My in-laws took the entire extended family, and we all went away to rented some cottages, total roughing it. We had air conditioning there, which we don't even have at home. I had a bunch of topics all planned of what I was going to do when I was there. A couple were on very specific species of fish that can be found in that region. And 10 of us fished in shifts every day out of a boat, trolling, still fishing, everything. Not a single person caught fish. I think there was a grand total of 2 bites. Not only that, nobody else staying at the lodge. All the fishermen used this dock and stuff come and go, and nobody was having fish. And one of the fishermen was saying that there was a big storm that came through or was coming through, and so the pressure changes and that affects everything. So then I didn't really care. I was just like, I didn't catch any fish, so I didn't get any of that content. But I did find some really unique things. There was one that was a total surprise, and that one's already made. That video is already done. It's already out there. And that one will be coming out on the 30th as it is right now. Thank you, my friend Robs. Robs is here. It's good to see. Robs is actually working right now. So, the guy that does the Aquarium Guys podcast. So if you guys got some cool ideas for Robs, feel free to put them into the chat there of who you'd like to see. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please check out the Aquarium Guys podcast. They're absolutely awesome guys. They do a great job. They do a great thing for the hobby. What else is going on at home? Oh, you're fine, James. Thank you. James, you're the one I owe apologies to, because I was when I got to the hotel yesterday, I was actually going through my laptop, and I went through into the section in my analytics where it shows comments that have not been answered. And I would say several of them are from you, because you write these. I feel like every time you give me a comment, it's like a science essay, and I've got to respond and answer about 12 questions. So they will come. I will answer them, my friend. I apologize for the delay. Yeah, got the fish bones on tonight. Figure we're going to be doing this. A special guest, special topic. Nothing else is happening at home. I'm still waiting to do the farm fencing. That's hopefully going to happen next week. I'm thinking of possibly booking some time off next week if I can get it, because the neighbor has now put his cows out in the third pasture behind my house, which means that the females are only going to move closer. Ignore that for a minute, guys. That's the fan for my jacuzzi. It blows out the lines in my jacuzzi. And once that's done, it just takes a minute, and then the sound will return back to normal. Just takes a second. Hey, I watched a live stream yesterday, and the two Australian guys talked about mushrooms and poop fires. So the best you guys are going to get is you're going to get a little bit of background noise as the fan clears out the plugs.
No poop fires tonight.
Maybe if I close the door, it'll be quieter.
Thanks,
Does that help? You can still hear it though, right? You can still totally hear it. So I'm very, very fortunate. You guys, some of you have probably never seen Kyle, but you know of him. Kyle is a very, very well-known, not just with our local aquarium societies and stuff, but he's also extremely active on a lot of forums and Facebook pages and groups pertaining to planted aquariums, but more specializing more in unique natural-styled aquariums incorporating using dirt. Now we're going to go into that in as much detail as you want. We've got Father Fish in the room here, so hopefully we won't do him too much of a disservice. He is a legend when it comes to doing this style of natural aquariums as well, so I'm honored to have him here. But about a year or so ago, Kyle was over at my place. We were having some drinks with a bunch of friends and stuff like that, and we tossed around the idea of, I said, for the YouTube channel, we should do one of the tanks in the fish room as a dirted tank. That was fine. We had a great night. And then he sent me the list of the stuff I had to go buy. Now, you're talking to a guy who's, years back used to use the different types of cat litters and things like that. Back in the day, I used to use that. Years before that, when I used to use when the Dupla book came out, or the Optimum Aquarium book came out, they had the different stuff talking about the different laterite soils and all those things. So I'm not new to all this. But nowadays we have the Amazonia soils, we have the new ones, the stratums, and the one I like, the one that I'm used to using, just more than likely because honestly it's the easiest for me to access, is the one from Tropica, because Tropica's now in BC, Vancouver, Canada, and I can actually access that stuff locally. And I like that stuff. And I can buy Kyle's got to go get his chicken. And we're not talking live chicken. Kyle is here tonight because he lives out like I do. He lives out in the country, and his internet service is not the best. So he stayed at work today an extra hour to be able to do this live stream from work with a better live feed. That's dedication right there. So what were we talking about? I was getting back to the soils and stuff. I like that one. I use that one. But when Kyle sent me this list, he sent me a list that was like, it was like a treasure hunt. It wasn't like just go to this garden center and you can get everything you need. No. I have to go to home centers, hydroponic stores, craft stores, garden centers. And I think to this day, go eat your chicken. And to this day, I think I only have, honestly, about half of some of the accoutrements that I'm going to need to do said tank. Now, getting back to the Tropica soil, the big bag of Tropica soil is about $100, $90 or something like that. I don't know if it's changed. I know when you buy it here, you're buying it in Canadian currency because it's already in the country. And I have two of those bags sitting there ready to go to do a 70-gallon tank whenever I want. No problem. We'll just round it off. We'll say $200. Well, I bet you I've spent more than that already in all these soils and additives and green mud. What's the green mud? I don't even know how we'll talk about it today. I got this little satchel, and that's the best way to describe it. This little tiny bag. It was like $28. Oh, you got to be kidding me. I don't even know. It's all magical stuff in his eyes. Nice to see you, Chewy. Nice to see you, Adele. Thank you. No, you weren't late, Adele. It's just I was more concerned. Normally when I start a live stream, there's always usually about 10, 12, 13 people already waiting in the wings. And we were getting like 1 minute, 2, and there was nobody. And then I went live. And there was nobody. And then all of a sudden, Father Fish was there, David was there, and all you guys are starting to come in. And we're sitting at, if I'm correct, if somebody correct me, because I'm not used to using StreamYards as much, I only use it when I'm on the road. It looks like right now we're sitting at about 24 people in the room.
You can see?
So,
I can't even see that.
That's pretty good. It's the first thing in the AM here. Well, we're honored. Thank you. And Carrie's here. Thank you for joining us. So I guess without further ado, you guys don't need to hear what's happening with me and the farm and all that sort of stuff. All that stuff's going to come. We're still got videos scheduled right now all the way up until the 6th of August. They're already scheduled, and I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm working on. But tonight, hopefully after this, I might be able to get one nailed and put to bed, maybe tomorrow one as well. And then Friday, I've got a long, arduous day on Friday. You guys won't care about this, but I'm going to tell you anyways because it's my live feed. But basically, I'm going to get up really, really early, or Thursday night. We're going to drive about an hour and a half out of the city here where I'm staying with my father-in-law. We're going to go pick up a trailer, and then we're going to drive all the way back an hour and a half, and then we're going to go to the home store and pick up a bunch of 2x6s, and then we're going to wait. And then we're going to get up really early in the morning and drive 3 hours north to go pick up a tractor. That's what we do. We go pick up tractors. And then we're going to drive that tractor 8.5, 9 hours home. That does sound fun. I know you're all jealous, but that's what's happening. I do want to put a plug out right now for some dear friends. For those of you that may not know or that do know, I would assume everybody that is in our chat tonight is probably a subscriber of this organization, but some very, very dear friends, Big Rich and Josh over to Ohio Fish Rescue, they are absolutely buttoned down right now with the amount of work they've got to get done right now. Rich's wife has come home from the hospital, and he is providing 100% of her care. Well, I'm 100% with his son, and Josh has kind of upped his game and is probably taking time off work and is doing absolutely everything for the rescue. If you guys know anything about these guys and what they do, that is an absolutely massive undertaking that probably a team of 12 of us couldn't probably tackle. But for Big Rich and Josh, this is just everyday life. So I just wanted to, show my support for my dear friends. Adele, you know them more than you know them more than any of us. You're a moderator for them, and you work for them all the time and do stuff. You're a great, great asset to them. But let's just show our support for Big Rich, Tracy, and Josh as well. So with that, I think it's time we should move on to the actual topic at hand. We've got the guy in the hot seat. He hasn't eaten any chicken. Feel free to eat some chicken while we talk about, we're going to do our dirty talk tonight. We're going to talk about mud tanks. I don't think me and Kyle honestly have not had, Kyle, you can attest to this. We have actually not spent any time preparing. We've not had open discussions or anything like that. Kyle does these type of things. The thing I like best about Kyle is he's like an uglier, younger version of me. And he's one of these devoted, passionate naturalists. Like, he does gardening, he does miniature terrariums, he does ponds, he does turtles. He's fascinated by absolutely every facet of nature. But one thing that he has this type of mind similar to me, that he wants to figure out the little pieces of the puzzle and make it work. And that's when it comes, when he started telling me about all these different additives and stuff that we had to buy. A lot of it is kind of obscure and weird to me. And I'm hoping by tonight's live feed, not only will he be able to help a lot of us, but he'll probably also be able to help me a lot too, and better understand why I've got $200 worth of multicolored different types of muds in my garage awaiting. Yeah, you're just a jerk. All I had was a poop. Oh, there's pickles on it.
Look at those.
Done.
Austin.
Nicely done. All right. So, Kyle, give us your quick story, how you got started, why mud tanks, how you ended up at mud tanks, natural tanks, whatever it is.
Well, I only started really getting in aquariums it's only been like 5 or 6 years. But when I started, I was really interested in planted tanks. That's what drew me to aquariums. And the problem was
when I was younger too. That was the first thing. And eventually you wander away from it. You got to find a way to get back.
I had seen all these videos on YouTube of these guys with these full giant, just swarming with plants, like, the aquascape tanks and stuff. But at the time, only 6 years ago, around here, where we are in Canada, it was tough to get aqua soil or tropica soil or any of the good soils without paying like 3 times as much through shipping.
Yes.
So I wanted to find something similar. And I looked into dirted tanks, and I thought, okay, dirt's good. And I tried it, and I had some success. But within 6 months, my plants were showing some deficiencies. like iron and potassium and a few things. And I just started looking and researching on the forums. I know Planet Tank Forum was a big one for me back in the day.
You're really showing your age compared to people like me and Father Fish.
Yeah, I didn't look at books. I wasn't going to clubs. I just went on the old Google, and I found a few different forums pages guys talking about adding mineral amendments and stuff to their soil. And I had already been really like well introduced to a lot of these things through organic gardening.
Mm-hmm.
So things like green sand, langbonite, SalpoMag.
Langbonite.
Yeah. The
Got any langbonite?
The soft rock
phosphate. Langbonite.
It's a SalpoMag.
Well, that definitely cleared it up. Did you just speak Korean? What did you say?
It's SalpoMag, sulfur, potassium, magnesium.
Oh, okay.
And it's in a little pelletized form, and it's some sort of mineral, and the mineral salts, and they make it in a pelletized form. It's a slow release. I like to sometimes I'll put that on the bottom of a tank. The sulfur helps start acidifying and breaking down your mineral amendments right away. It's got long-term potassium, magnesium. You have to have a proper balance of magnesium and calcium with everything. So things like that. And I started figuring out that I could add those to my tank without having any issues. So I started experimenting. I had all these things, and I figured I could try to make a dirt that might be as good as ADA or Tropica substrates or something that would give
you were tinkering before those things. You were just trying to go after what was already kind of out there and make your own.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we didn't have that option when we were doing it. And also, I go back years ago. Miracle Grow it was available when I was Aquarist and stuff, but we never used it because we knew about it. But like that came on after. I remember a product that came. We used this weird clay cat litter. It was orange.
Yeah.
And it was porous, but it also was very, very light. It sank, but slowly. So you'd have to set your tank up with this clay, like orangey cat litter. I don't remember what it was called. I used to buy it. It was actually sold at Walmart at the time, or Woolco. And the only problem is you had to cap it, because if you ever lifted a plant out of it, all the substrate just went, woo.
I've used cat litter too.
Yeah.
But the stuff now, it's a little more gray. It's the common one is the Special Kitty, unscented clay, non-clumping cat litter. It's made of
work all that well.
it's made of montremelinite clay.
Yes.
And they bake it and they crush it, and it almost has the same consistency as something like ADA or something, just without the organic amendments added when they crush and bake the clay together.
Okay.
So they add stuff like peat and stuff into it when they do that in that process, and they make the pellets. Mm-hmm. The cat litter is almost like that, minus the extra stuff. So it's an awesome substrate if you're going to be dosing fertilizers.
Okay, but you would have to permanently do that. Yeah. And I think it needs to be said that just because we keep planted aquariums, and there's some absolutely breathtaking planted aquariums, and there's some absolute masters that keep planted tanks. I'm definitely not in that group. But not every single plant from every single region requires the same thing either. And that's where we have to try and find a nice balance that works. Like Julie pointed out something about keeping the Listeria, which is a general harder water plant. That has vastly different conditions in the wild than an Echinodorus or Cryptocrine or any of those other ones, right? They all come from different water sources. So even when Dupla came out with that thing years ago, or not Dupla, Optima, I was Dupla, when they came out with the laterite, well, that was based on cryptocrines and a lot of the stuff from African and Asian streams where, and it also worked well for a lot of the South American stuff that came from softer water. And it worked great for that stuff, but stuff like Ballistera, anything that came from harder water, would probably do well because it was taking whatever it needed, and whatever it didn't need didn't affect it, I guess. Yeah. Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah. And that's one nice thing about making your own soil is you can figure out what you're planting and customize it for that specifically. Yeah. So say you want to do a tank with a ton of swords, you really pump a lot of, like, put a thick layer of dirt, use a really heavy compost in your dirt, because the swords are going to have a massive root system to keep that all healthy and prevent it from going anaerobic, and they're going to use it like crazy.
Yeah. And is there a timeline that you would say, like, I know every tank would be slightly different depending on how it's used, but you could never ever set up a naturally dirted aquarium and leave it for permanent. Eventually, the nutrient content or the value of the soil would be depleted, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's ways around that. If you're going to do a high-tech tank and you're going to put in large plants and you're going to run CO2, you're going to burn that substrate up quicker, and you may have to add more back to it. But the other part of it is, at the beginning, I add so much of things like the green sand and things, the mineral amendments, that are going to last the longest. Because things like, when you start running short on phosphorus and nitrogen, that's fed back by your fish food.
Yes.
So as you're feeding, as the mulm builds up, that's going to work back into your substrate, and it's going to replenish those things. So the main things I focus on with my amendments that I'm adding is long-term potassium and phosphorus, or not phosphorus, iron.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the green sand specifically, the one amendment that I like to use, I know Father Fish in the room, he uses ironite. Ironite is a mineral amendment for organic use. I'm not exactly sure what ironite's all made of, but it's a huge iron booster. It adds a ton of iron to your soil. So his use of it in the tank, it becomes a long-term store of iron in there.
Mm-hmm.
So as the plant roots grow down, there's a bit of a process going down in there. So the plants create what's called the oxidized rhizosphere around their roots.
Okay.
Every aquatic plant has the ability to exude oxygen and produce oxygen and expel it from their root system. Mm-hmm. It's required to keep them healthy in anaerobic soils and
land plants do the same thing.
So as it does that, it's oxidizing the mineral content in the soil too, and the bacteria that live in that oxygen-rich environment around the root, they're able to oxidize, break down, and make bioavailable those different mineral amendments like the iron. And in green sand has a large store of potassium in the glauconite. It's also called glauconite.
I remember when we were making, we used to do our own. And this is going to date again. This I'm going to say is probably mid 80s. We used to make our own poor man. We called it poor man dosing drops, I think, where we used to make our own liquid fertilizer of the elements that we wanted. And we would be able to get everything at a hydroponic store. And I don't remember all the different things that we used to buy in powdered form. And I had a gross beer bottle, with a little flip top. And that was a brown glass gross beer bottle. And that was my fertilizer bottle. It worked great for mixing it up. I could always keep it capped. It was a dark bottle, so I could keep it hidden away. And I remember making it. And this is just going to be the fact that I don't remember. But I remember there was only certain types of iron additives we could use, and some weren't absorbable or the inability for the plant to absorb it. Was it chelated or non-chelated? I can't remember. Does that ring a bell? No? Because you go to a garden center and you can buy iron as a powder. Like you can buy any liquid powder, fertilizers, and all that stuff. But they'll sell iron for specific plants for horticulture growth. And so I couldn't remember if it was one was chelated or non-chelated as to which one worked well. I couldn't remember.
Might be chelated iron.
Yeah?
That would be the faster absorbed, I think.
More easily, readily absorbed by the plant. Yeah. I noticed there was a question here for you here. Yeah, it was a two-part. Chewy, who's a Canadian, he says the idea of sump filtration, you could probably see the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The idea of sump filtration comes into this from cichlid keepers, unless they have methods for old masters to keep Vallisneria with African cichlids. The problem being with a Vallisneria can grow exceedingly fast if fertilized properly and it's got the right amount of light and it's got some current, it'll grow really, really fast. And keeping it with African cichlids, I have done that in the past, Tanganyikans primarily. I've never kept it with, say, Tropheus. but I have kept them in tanks, and it did very, very well. But he was talking about, it was something to do with one of the points that you may mention, and he wanted to know if you've ever taken that challenge. As Rift Lake cichlids get a bad rap, that's not deserved like their Central American cousins. Because the problem being, you put them into a Rift Lake cichlid tank, and they're going to mow down the plants faster than they're going to replicate, right? Or reproduce, or grow, whatever you want to call it.
I've never actually even kept African cichlids. So I've never kept plants with them.
Yeah.
I did recently have in a tank, a 55-gallon dirted tank, totally full of Listeria. I had South American cichlids in there, and they were trying to dig up and create little burrows and pits, but the plants had been in there for 2 years before I added the fish.
Yeah.
So
they were established and everything like that.
They were so rooted they couldn't even dig in there.
Yeah.
But no, I've never tried keeping plants with African cichlids. I've never had them. My suggestion to keep, if you want to keep plants with African cichlids, is to find plants that will grow above the water. Try riparium growth. Like, you can find riparium planters. People make planters out of bathroom caddies.
Yep.
Fill it up.
Little patio, hang on your windowsill type planters and stuff, and hang them behind the tank. And
yeah, for big tanks.
I didn't grow in Anubias and different types of things that just grow them immersed right out of the tank. Yeah.
And with like a big enough tank and big plants, you could even put dirt in that. What you would do is in the bottom part, put some like of your finer gravel or like planting substrate or something like fluorite, and then put a layer of dirt, and then put the plant. And as it roots and grows into there, it'll use that, and it'll still grow and down and get like nitrates and phosphorus out of the water, but it'll use like the other nutrients in there to stay fully healthy and get the full spectrum of nutrients it needs.
And I would use things like similar to what they use for breeding boxes, little air-driven tubes to bring water into the unit, and one little one to take it out as well. So it actually acts as a nice naturalized filtering system for it too.
That could work too. Yeah, you could. It works really well too if you do passive though, and you have it set up almost like a pond planter or something, like where people have on the edge of their pond, and you just have it hanging on the back of the tank. As long as there's flow in the tank, and there's like a lot of holes through your container, the roots will eventually come down and they'll start growing into the tank.
Yep.
And most plants, even plants like I know people are usually worried about pothos, fish eating the roots, but I've never heard of an issue.
I've never had a problem. That seems to be something that's been creeping up as of late, and I've done that for decades.
I think the issue with pothos mostly comes when mammals eat it.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think reptiles and fish are affected the same way.
I don't know. So
I know,
one thing that I noticed here in the chat as well, Adele is from Australia. So I think we're kind of at the halfway mark here. So I think what we should do is we should kind of give a rundown of the different type of products that you use. And if it's something specific, green sand, for example, in Australia, they might not sell a product known as green sand. What is green sand, and how could she access green sand without knowing what it may be called there? She needs to know what the actual ingredient is of that product, correct?
True.
And then you had me trying to look for this red clay at the craft stores and worm castings. And she doesn't necessarily have to find earthworm castings soil. She could use bat guano soil or wallaby soil. You know what I mean? What are the additives that people in general could look for, and the purpose? So there was about 6 or 8 items that you wanted me to acquire. I'm guessing, I don't even remember. It was so long ago. Maybe kind of run down. This is number 1. You got to get a good quality this, and this is why. Could we do that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you got to start with is your dirt. What are you going to use? The first thing you want to make sure is it's organic, because you don't really want to risk putting chemical fertilizers into the tank because they'll leach too fast. So you want to start with a good organic fertilizer or soil. Something, try to look for like a topsoil, black earth, worm castings work well. Some peat-based potting mixes sometimes work, but you have to add more to them.
Just make sure the real thing is that you're looking for a good quality organic potting soil,
Yeah.
A nice rich soil. You don't want it jet black. You want it to have a lot of humus and compost and organic matter to it. The more of that, the better it is. Same rule of thumb that you do for planting vegetable gardens and whatnot. And when it comes to the fertilizer thing, is really, really go over the bag with a fine-tooth comb, because a lot of them will not even mention it on the front of the bag. You got to really look into it. If there's a mention of the breakdown of the fertilizers, the NPK in the ingredient panel, that's not the soil for you for this purpose.
And try to stay, if you can, stay away from potting mixes, and try to use soil if you can. Potting mixes will work. They take a little more prep. Because they usually have perlite.
Somebody just posted, how do you feel about perlite? I found it floated and made a mess. Yeah, you'll never sink perlite. And perlite is not designed to be in an aquarium.
If you can only find a soil mixed with perlite, like a potting mix, the trick to do first is get a large tub, pour all your dirt in there first, fill it full of water, stir it up, and let it sit. All the perlite should float to the surface, and anything that floats you just want to scrape off. Let it sit until everything settles and the water clears out. Might take a few hours. And then go get a siphon hose and just siphon off the top water until you get down to the dirt. Yeah. And then you should be left with everything good that you want to keep.
Yeah, throwing away 1/3 of what you just bought. Don't buy that stuff with the perlite in it. It'll solve all your headaches.
If it's the only thing you can get, though, that's probably your best option.
Yeah. So what's next after dirt? Well, adding peat moss is an organic an acidifier and stuff. Yeah. It's organic matter, but it's long sustaining, but it doesn't really give off a lot quickly.
No. So the next thing you want to look at is generally your iron and calcium. You can go with just your dirt and iron and a calcium supplement, and you could have years of really good growth out of your plants if in a low-tech setup.
Yeah.
So next you want to look for something like, I know Fatherfish uses ironite.
Yes.
That's a bagged product. I'm not sure. I think you can get it in the US. I haven't seen it in Canada.
But what is it? Is it a powdered iron supplement, or what is it?
I think they're small granule size. It's an iron supplement. It's a remineralizer for your soil.
Okay. So they would generally access something like that either through a hydroponic store as a supplement, or you would be using it at a gardening center or something like that. As a
probably find it at a gardening center or like a hardware store with a gardening center.
Big home hardware sort of style, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The other option is going to the craft store and finding red self-hardening clay. I know there's a popular brand that everyone was using called Amaco, AMACO. And I haven't been able to find the red stuff for a while.
And we're talking red clay that looks like terracotta pots. That's this type of stuff that they would make.
It's not terracotta. There's a separate color called terracotta. This is specifically red self-hardening clay.
Okay.
Yeah. It has a higher iron content to create that gives it the red color.
Okay.
And when you add it to your dirt, not only will it give you a long-term iron source in the dirt, it works a bit as a flocculating agent. So as the clay kind of gets wet and soaks in with the dirt, it'll help keep particles together in the dirt. Another option, if you can't find the iron in the clay, is trying to find maybe using fluorite, red fluorite in your dirt. That's
a CCAM product, and that should be available globally. Yeah, but using that on its own, like a lot of people, whether people are starting out, they often view that as a all-encompassing plant substrate, and in your eyes, and my eyes as well, it's not a complete. It's a good starting point, but it's definitely not complete if you want to go to the next level.
And that's one thing that really makes fluorite work amazing with dirt. I've capped with fluorite before. I've capped my dirt with fluorite, and it was amazing the growth I had. Because your fluorite, in turn, gives you all those minerals and everything, and your dirt becomes your large organic nitrogen phosphorus base. So you could almost use just black earth, cap it with fluorite, and you will have amazing plant growth
Okay.
for years.
Now, the one next step that you mentioned was you were talking about after iron was calcium.
Calcium.
Yeah.
There's a few things you can use. A popular one was what is it? The lime, like a lime supplement for people use them in like tomato gardening and stuff. Dolomite lime.
Oh, dolomitic lime, yes.
Yeah.
But you want it in like a powdered form, so it's readily soluble.
Yeah, you can get that at like gardening center too. It's usually a white powder. And when you put that in, it's very little, and you sprinkle it on the bottom of the tank before you put the dirt in on top of it. Another one people I've seen use powdered oyster shells.
Powder is the
Oyster.
key. You add too much oyster shell to your mix and stuff like that, and you're not planning on keeping African rifflate cichlids, you're going to harden you're like, all you're going to do is harden your water to a point where you won't get good successful growth, except for maybe, like Chewy pointed out, that Listeria.
And that's the other thing. You're only adding a tiny bit of calcium. Your plants aren't going to use a ton of it. Even if you have Listeria, only a small sprinkling will do them. You put it on the very bottom of the tank first, because it's going to help keep your substrate from going too sour. It's going to help keep it balanced, the pH in there. And keeping it low, like right on the bottom of the substrate layer, helps prevent it from leaching out and quickly dissolving away into all your water column.
So you're not taking all these different soil amendments and throwing them into a big Rubbermaid and mixing it all together and then putting it in as a mixed substrate. You're actually putting them into the tank in layers, like
some of them.
Like cake.
Something like the calcium, that one I'll sprinkle on the bottom first. The iron, I'll mix that into the dirt. So there's a process. There's a few things you gotta consider as you go. So another calcium I've used, it's not a ton of calcium actually, and Father Fish recently spoke about this, was diatomaceous earth.
Yes.
Diatomaceous earth. It does have
extremely fine, and the only problem in Canada is it's a bit challenging to find in larger quantities.
Yeah.
Well, there's two first. You can go to a feed store for animal feed, and you can buy the big bag that they use for controlling insects.
The 50 pound bag of it.
Oh, it's like it's a 50-pound bag.
Yeah.
A 50-pound bag is something that weighs the weight of feathers. It's a massive bag, and it's not expensive. Or you go to any of the pet stores and they sell it for supplements to add to dogs' diets and stuff. Most people don't know, but dolomite, or not dolomite, what are we talking about? Diatomaceous. It looks like talcum powder, but if you were to look at it under a microscope, it's super sharp, jagged crystals. And we use it in the garden industry for sprinkling to control slugs and snails, stuff like that. Once it got wet, though, it was useless. And anybody that's an old term aquarist would always remember the old school Vortex Diatom filters, and they were absolute legends. I used them all the time. I could go to a tank that I was doing maintenance on, put that on, run it for 10, 15 minutes, and that tank was polished. And diatomaceous earth, once it went into the pores of the filter bag, would actually filter down below a micron. It could actually take ick out of the actual aquarium water.
It'll take green water out too.
Yeah. But it's a bit challenging to get.
Yeah, I say look at feed stores where they sell livestock feed, and you can usually find a 50-pound bag of Permagard for $40 to $30.
Yeah, the reason it disappeared, like I see GJ Aquatics mentioned that you can buy it. I'm assuming that's in the States.
Yeah, the stuff for pool filters is different.
Yes.
You have to get the food grade stuff used in livestock purposes.
Yeah. The reason that it went off the shelves is the product was known as a carcinogen, and it wasn't readily available in a lot of places. But I have noticed as of late, and even in the pet side where I work, I do sell it as a dog dietary supplement. Yep. And it sells in these little tiny jars for $17.99 or whatever it is, because nobody knows to go buy the giant. What are they going to do with the giant bag, right? We did our whole chicken coop, and I think we used the scoop, the equivalent of like a margarine tub.
It's great in the garden. It's great in the garden. I all the extra stuff I have, I use it in the garden as a pest cure-all.
Yeah, but if I put it in the garden next year, we're gonna have a problem with the chickens. I gotta go buy another giant bag.
It's great though. It has a little bit of calcium in it. It has a bit of iron in it generally,
Okay.
but the big thing that it seems to supply is silicon.
Yes.
It's one of the most absorbable natural forms of anamorphous silica.
Okay.
And if it does the same for aquatic plants like it does for my garden, when I started adding diatomaceous earth to my tomatoes, all the stems got stronger and more rigid and thicker.
Yep.
Silica helps. It's the building block of life. It's one of the most important building blocks of life.
Yep.
Adding that to your soil, it also diatomaceous earth. It's a fossilized layer created by diatom plankton in the ocean.
Mhm.
So it comes from their shell. So you're adding more aquatic life back to your soil.
And that brings us directly to the next one. Your wonderful little expensive bag of green dust or mud or whatever you want to call it. I couldn't imagine. When I asked her for that, oh yeah, we've got that. She brings me, it was like a drug deal. She brings me this little sealed green bag. Looks like they bagged it themselves. And I'm like, how come it doesn't have a label on it? What are you giving me here? Why is it $30? What is this stuff?
Green sand.
What's the purpose of green sand?
There's a couple types. I'm not certain the product that I've been using, which one it is, which might be good to know.
Confidence.
There's Jersey green sand and there's Texas green sand. They're both just mined in different areas, so they have a slightly different mineral content. Green sand, it's another fossilized layer. It's called the name of the product is actually called glauconite.
Mm-hmm.
Glauconite is a fossilized layer in the ocean created by a ton of organic life and sea life that's just died and built up and over thousands of years and created a hefty layer. And they started mining it up and they turned it into a powder. It's a mineral form. It's high in silicates, some more silicon. It's high in potassium and iron, and there's probably about 40 or so more other trace minerals and elements in there.
Okay.
I found adding that to my dirt has given me the most success, because the two things I've found would run out the fastest every time. The first two minerals I would notice deficiencies in is iron and potassium.
And which?
Iron and potassium.
Yeah.
So if you don't add an iron source, you're going to run into issues depending on if you have plants that have a need for it. And if you add the green sand, it also becomes a very, very long-term source of potassium, which is hard to come by, because most plants actually, they really absorb potassium better through their shoots and their leaves than they do their root zone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to give you a long-term slow release. It's going to leach into the water. It's going to be in the root zone. It's really the only good way I found to create a long-term source. The only other way I found to introduce potassium over time was switching to like a kelp-based food for my fish.
Okay. So if we were to do a rundown, just real dumbed down, basic version, we take a 10-gallon tank and we're going to set it up dirted tank. What ratios are we talking? It's a brand new tank. Got it at Petco at the dollar a gallon sale. You're all excited. You're going to do your first dirted tank. So you're going to get it home. You're just going to dust the bottom with dolomitic lime or something, right? Dolomite or something, shell grit or any of those type of calcium source, right?
Yeah, you want to dust it just enough, not to totally cover, but just a sprinkle over top, a light dusting over your.
Season it gently.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, what's next?
So next, let's say we're just going to go with the standard iron, dolomite, lime, dirt method.
Okay.
This used to be called the Aaron Talbot method on the forums. A guy who came up with this. So next you'll go and get your dirt, whatever you're using. The common one used to be Miracle Grow Organic Choice.
That doesn't have Fluorite or fertilizer.
No, it's just an organic compost and dirt mixture with some peat and other things. So you take that and you're going to put it in Put it in a container first and wet it down. You want to get it to like a kind of a pasty consistency almost. So it's like a goop, not liquidy, not runny, but where it's goopy. So you can kind of tap it and like get all the air bubbles out of it. It'll settle.
Yeah, nothing worse than when you go and take like a bag of peat and you try and pot with it. It just floats. It needs to absorb water first.
Yeah. So you want to get this all to soak up water, become waterlogged like mud. Now you're going to pour that in and try to spread it out. You want it to be about, well, there's a few different ways of going about it. If you're planning on doing a short-term tank that you know you're going to tear down, you're going to want to go only about an inch, inch and a half of dirt. If you're going to plan on setting up a tank that you want to last forever, you're going to follow the method that Father Fish always talks about, that I'm glad someone is finally mentioning, deep substrate.
Yeah.
You want to go 2 inches of dirt. And then you're going to cap it later with another 2 inches of something. So you have about a 4-inch substrate layer. A bigger tank, you can go even more. A smaller tank, like a 10-gallon, it might be a little much having a 4-inch substrate layer. Oh, I can speak. I know English. That might take up a lot of room. So you might want to go something lower. So with a bigger tank or something like that, you want to go 2 inches to about an inch of dirt. And in the dirt, an easy way to mix in that iron, you can get it the clay in a powdered form sometimes. Yep. If you can't, get your brick of clay that you pull out your red self-hardening clay and go get a cheese grater, your smallest cheese grater, and
okay,
you're going to get a bunch of little pieces, and you can mix that into the dirt nice and evenly.
It provides the exact same benefits. Yeah, still there. Yeah, in the wild, when a plant's planted in the substrate in the wild, you don't know how deep that goes.
Yeah.
Right? But in an aquarium, we have that hard bottom glass layer. We can only go so high, unless you're planning on doing all the immersed growth.
So you got to keep your substrate layer in mind, because or your depth, because if you're going to go deep, you're going to want to put in some plants that are going to grow large root masses down into there too. So if you're going with a 4-inch deep substrate layer, you're going to want to stick something like cryptocranes or sword plants in there.
Yeah. And you put you go and buy literally any sword plant at a pet store and put it into these tanks and just give it normal light like you would otherwise. And with all that nutrient organic matter, that plant is going to explode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, the only other things that we talked about as additives and stuff like that was really just the green sand, right? Where would you put that in those layers if you were to do that, or would you mix it in with the soil?
Green sand gets mixed in with your soil.
Okay.
And ratios, I haven't really figured out where I need to stop with it. I found out that I can just keep adding, and I haven't had any issues yet. So I generally add several cups in. I don't really have a great number on the ratio I need for green sand.
Well, that's what everybody asks, is how much of this, because we want it that way, right?
Yeah.
People always want it dumbed down completely for them.
It's a tough one.
People that are watching us, they're really, really smart people, so they can figure all this out on their own, but we just kind of give them basics.
I was just a gardener who found a tank and started throwing dirt and plants in it. And so the next thing you got to do is cap it. Because if you fill up the tank now, all your dirt's just going to float away and you're going to have a mess, and you can't put any flow in there. So generally, people cap with gravel or sand. And there's some people that have different issues with both. First of all, if you're capping with gravel, it has to be like a finer grain, something like BB sized, like a BB gun, or a little big. It's slightly bigger, because if it's too big, you're going to get all your dirt will just float up through it and it'll sink down into your dirt. Yeah. If it's too small, well, I guess it can't really. If it's too small, then you might run into some of the same issues you run into with sand.
Yeah.
Sand.
It compacts too much.
It'll compact. So you want to try to find a bigger grain sand, but sand can work. I have in another one of my most successful tanks, I had 2 inches of dirt capped with 2 inches of black fluorite sand. And if you know anything about black fluorite sand, it will pack down and become like concrete if you don't touch it. And
the idea, I think the other advantage too is like I always like using like a 1 or 2 millimeter gravel. Where we are, PV Mart carries chicken grit that comes in from Alberta, like that stuff that I brought in from Saskatchewan that I use in all my tanks. It's a nice natural. It's quartz. It doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect the chemistry at all, and it's a nice natural blended stuff. Now, if you're using sands and the finer substrates, the only thing that you have to take in consideration, sword plants are okay, but the sword plants, when they send off babies, they're generally off of an inflorescence, and then they'll throw off little babies up at the top. But the problem being is when you're talking about doing those real fine substrates, you're going to want some plants that are going to move and disturb that substrate so they can move it around themselves. Listerias, and I can't think of the one that starts with an S. What starts with S looks like Sagittarius and anything like that that creeps along. The crypts are the same thing. They'll creep along and move away with it and stuff. All those things would do really, really well with those finer substrates. But it's just something like you say, you have to take that into consideration, because if you don't and it compacts, if you have 1/3 of your tank and you don't really do any maintenance on that third of the tank because it's fully planted, and those are all kind of specimen plants, you may have some problems, right?
I had that issue. I had one side of my 55, I just didn't really touch it. There were crypts in that corner and some stuff, but I started noticing my crypts were even having issues, and I hadn't ever gone and poked that side of the substrate, and I went over there and I poked it, and the fluorite had packed, and it had compacted, and it was like I had a layer of asphalt on top of my dirt. So I went in there with a chopstick, and I just poked it all, loosened it up. I moved a couple of hygrophila cuttings over there into that corner. Everything came back. The crypts took off again, and everything came back to life.
Yeah. By using a chopstick. That's literally what you did. That's all it was.
Chopstick saved my tank.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. It's when you're going to go this sort of style. Can you do a planted tank? Can you go to the pet store? Can you order this stuff online and you use these pre-made? I don't like the ones like, and I don't like using names. I think they all have they're all benefits. But like the ones by Fluval and some of those, there are these round little BBs. To me, it looks so foreign in the tank to me.
Yeah.
Now, they do all have their purpose, though. I was down in Florida in September doing video, and I feel like an absolute idiot because my brain's somewhere else right now. And I've had about 10 of these, but I was doing some video down there of a good friend who has an entire house filled with shrimp. And I was just talking with him the other day, and he uses one of those types of soils in a large way because it's a calcium source, and it's also, I'm just looking through my phone to see if I can get something to grab me right away. Grant Eater. And he uses those type of pelleted type substrates. He uses a specific one that's not I think it's from Brightwell.
Brightwell, yeah.
And he uses that one specifically because it has benefits that it offers to the shrimp. And I don't want to misquote it, but I know in one of the videos that I did with him, he talked about it and what the benefit was, because I actually asked that. But when I see all these little round pebbles in the tank as the substrate, to me it just looks so foreign. Mud looks like mud. Peat moss looks like peat moss. Blended together, it looks organic, it looks natural. But seeing all these little pre-formed pellets, that's not really my style. Now, you can go that route. We have great growth. Yeah, it's all controlled. It's all thought out. But if you're a tinkerer at heart, like both of us are, and you want to have some fun, and you want to see what works, what doesn't work, and you want to really be involved in your hobby, I think it's far more rewarding going this route. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say you're going to save piles of money. I bet you probably would. I think you probably would. It's just me going out and buying the biggest bag of all these things to do this one build. There's a bit of sticker shock getting all these things all at once. But I think if you have them, like you're saying, the dolomitic lime, I might buy a 4-liter pail, but I might literally only use the equivalent of an ounce or two of it to do this size of a tank. Versus some of the other ones, you might use a larger volume, and some are small, and they're all different additives, and you have them on hand, and you do 3 or 4 different tanks at a time. So, is there any things, Father Fish? Absolutely, it's an honor to have you, my friend. Father Fish is. Oh,
did we lose him? What happened to Chris, everyone?
I don't know what I hit. Something happened.
Hey, he's back.
All of a sudden, my whole screen was blank, and I was just on the front page of my computer.
I thought it was the Mad Kyle show for a minute.
Go with it.
Yeah.
Oh, Superfish Nerd here. I'm back. The only real benefit of the round pelleted clay substrates are the moments you catch your shrimp picking it up like little beach balls as they keep. That's awesome. That's exactly it.
You know,
so like, well, yeah, all those type of things. They're all the same sort of thing. Do they work? They work excellent, and they've been. I call those engineered soils. Is that a good way of saying it? It's completely engineered to do it. Because you could literally, if you lived in an area, a non-urbanized area, out in the garden and stuff like that, somewhere me and Kyle live, and you've got an area like my place, the soil's probably super rich because it's reclaimed cow pasture. But the problem being is I've got to go underneath all the stuff that's there and the amount of stuff that's growing in it and the weeds and all that sort of stuff. It's just more hassle. When I can go to any garden center and buy a nice bag of organic, high compost, humic, nice soil that's nice and loose and airy, and bring it home and add it to the tank. It's good to go. It'll probably cost me about $10.
Yeah.
Does anybody else, Adele or anybody else, have any questions pertaining to doing a dirted tank, or any specific questions pertaining to any of the products that Kyle may have mentioned tonight? Sorry for our backdrops. I'm away in a hotel, as I mentioned. Kyle stayed at work because he lives out in the country like I do, and our internet signals aren't the best. And we're definitely not on par yet where we have these fancy backgrounds and stuff. Neither of us have that skill level.
I put a plant there for everyone.
There you go. Yeah. I don't have that option. Hello, Sydney. Do you have some questions? Or are you just signing in?
I know right now I'm
Yes, James, they will over time. Yes, all those engineered soils are designed to break down. I do know another gentleman that I will have on the show eventually is Gareth Domine. Gareth lives out in BC, and we brought him into the Aquarium Society, the local club. Anybody that knows high-tech planted tanks, real high-tech planted tanks, will know Gareth by his planted tank. He had a 180-gallon tank, and he took a picture of this tank and the cabinet and the way all the tech was set up underneath. And this thing went global. Like, it just went crazy. And that's how I kind of found him. He's an absolute wonderful guy. I brought him in. He stayed with us. And when he was at my place, we actually did what me and Kyle are talking about doing. And we're going to be going and doing a full dirted tank setup. But when Gareth was there, we did a full tank setup. I just made him work. I figured he had to work for his room and board. And we did a 75-gallon tank with my Dokinsia similis barbs, my breeding tank. And he set that whole thing from scratch. And this was long before I was doing YouTube. And we basically just went and got the dupla soil and all that stuff. And I basically wanted to see him. I wanted to see how his brain worked from start to finish, just doing an entire scape. It wasn't talking about the dirt and all that stuff, because we just went and bought the engineered zone. We took the easy road. Sydney got tied up, but she's here. Thank you for coming. Kyle, do you struggle with string algae in a dirted tank?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, the biggest issue, the way I do tanks personally, every one of my tanks, I've never injected CO2. Never once. I've done everything low tech.
Yeah.
And the real issue there is you're trying to find your balance. Mm-hmm. And if you can't control the CO2, that's one more thing that you're trying to work with, and you're trying to figure it out. So trying to find the nutrient balance to how much plants I need and everything. Usually in the early stages, I'll run into some serious hair algae problems. And for some reason, every tank that I've done, I can't control it. I think it's because I'm on well water. My well water probably has some phosphates in it.
Yeah.
I get blackbeard algae.
Isn't your water like where you live? You live in the town called Stonewall, Manitoba. And Stonewall, Manitoba, for those that don't know, the entire substrate or the bedrock of Stonewall is pure limestone. Not just pure limestone. It is the limestone that every one of our parliament buildings is built out of, all the big old buildings downtown in Winnipeg. The prison at Stonewall Penitentiary is built out of.
Stonewall was founded as a limestone mining town.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're using basically liquid rock for your planted tanks.
The well at my house had to get drilled through about 30 to 50 feet of solid limestone to get to the aquifer. Yeah.
See, I do all my planted tanks. I use straight RO water, and then I just remineralize it.
My tap water TDS is around 400 to 450. Yeah, and
but you do that
carbonate
hardness. You do
hardness.
that for your terrariums. You do that for watering your orchids, everything.
No, I use for the orchids for my terrarium. I have an RO filter.
Okay.
You can't. I couldn't.
Well, the calcium buildup on everything would be terrible. I would think.
Yeah, it'd kill everything.
Well, I just
in my tanks.
Do a little glass vivarium and stuff like that, and planting it all up, and just using a misting bottle with your tap water, you would get lime deposits everywhere.
Yeah. My tanks, even the ones that don't have a high plant load in there, using up the carbonates, it looks like a saltwater tank with salt creep on it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one facet with a dirted aquarium, is that all that organic nutrient mass is in the aquarium already.
Yeah.
So unless you have that finding that balance, especially at the beginning, when you go and add all those new plants, you set up that tank like we were talking about with all your substrate layers. One question I noticed that somebody did ask was how deep would you put the cap?
How deep?
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm using, if it's sand and you're doing a thinner layer, maybe about 1 inch of sand. If you want to go thicker, 2 inches of dirt with 2 inches of sand on top. But then you also have to make sure you're adding plants that are going to have proper roots systems and stuff like Listeria and Sagittaria that'll like creep through the sand.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're going to be constantly needing to poke it, or adding things like Malaysian trumpet snails or lava snails or big Tylemania.
Add snails to your tank, because the Malaysian trumpet snails, as much of a noxious pest snail they may be, they will burrow and they will move the substrate around for you. So that might be a perfect, as people were talking about the idea of doing sand cap tanks, adding trumpet snails. That is something I'll do that as well.
And people complain, they say, oh, trumpet snails are going to overrun my tank. I've had a tank running for 3 years, added trumpet snails from day one, and there's never been a pest problem. If I turn on the lights at night, I'll see there are some, but it's not like a carpet of it. It's not like my substrate's moving. If your snails get to that level, it's likely because you've been overfeeding.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. Yeah. Now, when we talked about, and I when I went to the cap thing, I was getting at the beginning, when you set up that tank from scratch and you add all these different layers of substrates and you add all that plant life, yes, the plants will start growing, but they're not thriving yet. And that's where you're going to end up with these problems usually at the very beginning, because there's just so much nutrient level within this environment, and it's in a closed system. And then you got to wait for the balance of these plants. And the plants are just like fish can get stressed. Plants can definitely get stressed and shocked, and they have to take a time to adjust before they're going to start active growth. They got to kind of sit there and go, okay, what's going on?
Shock.
Okay, I'm going to send out some roots now. I think it's okay. And in a plant's mind, that's instant. But in our mind, that might be a 2-week period or a 3-week period and stuff. So plants work on a different system than us. They don't apparently follow the same calendar as we do. And that's where people will often have these problems, because all that organic, those algae and stuff, they're definitely there. Algae is always prevalent in the water sources. And if we just do one thing out of line a little bit, there's something there to capitalize on it. And algae happens to be one of them.
The best thing to do when you're starting a dirted tank is right off the bat, get as much plant mass as you can. Order all, you can't just start it and fill it up and go, oh, I'm going to plant the sword today, and next week I'll go out and I'll get my hygrophila, and then next week I'll go get my anubias, and I'll put that. It all has to go in, everything all at once, as much as you can.
I just noticed that Ian just posted a question asking about stem plants versus rose plants as heavy feeders. When you're doing it at the very beginning, like you're just saying, adding a lot of bunch plants at that point in time, even though they might not be in your end mind what you want your display tank to look like, you'd say, I want to have these beautiful display of crypts, slow grower, and I want a nice specimen plant here, slow grower. Adding that big, massive clump of fast-growing bunch plants will help control the nutrient explosion that's going to be there right at the get-go.
Absolutely, because right off the bat, you have to consider you just submerged 3 inches, or think of 3 inches in a 50 gallon, how much dirt that's going to be. 2-3 inches. You just submerged all that. It's going to start breaking down. It's going to release all sorts of stuff into the water column.
Yeah.
If you put those stem plants in that use a lot of more water column fertilization, they're going to explode in the first period of the tank. Also, as soon as you first submerge that, as that dirt's breaking down, you're going to notice in the early stages of a dirted tank, you're going to have high CO2 levels at the beginning.
Yep.
It might not even be safe to put fish in, not because of the ammonia spikes that it'll cause, but they might just get gassed out by the CO2.
Yep.
So that massive CO2 spike, the massive release of nutrients at the beginning, you have to counter that with stem plants, with floating plants, to keep the water clean, to help your slower plants stay protected and adjust better.
While they acclimatize, right?
Yeah.
Now,
After so long, after like a few months, it may start to it should stabilize after a couple months if you planted everything properly and you have a nice plant load. After about 2 months or so or less, it should stabilize. Eventually, some plants may struggle that prefer more water column fertilization. Eventually, your floating plants may start to suffer, and you can remove them then, because that means your floating plants have done their job.
Yes.
You may have enough bio load.
Unless you put duckweed in, then it's there for life.
Yeah, that's herpes. That's tank herpes.
Throw the tank away.
But
now, go ahead.
But yeah, it's at the beginning, there's going to be that big flush. So you add these things, and eventually it'll slow down. These things, and you'll notice that your heavy root feeders and stuff will be chugging along, and then your plant growth may slow down on top, and you may have to adjust, because now not only is there going to be less nutrient free floating and leaching into the water column, you're going to have a drop in those CO2 levels. So some of those plants that did really good for you in the first month of your tank may stop growing. Yeah. In my first dirted tank, I did Bacopa and Ludwigia were 2 of my stem plants, and they were amazing. Yeah. After 2 months, my Ludwigia started looking twisted and dead, and my Bacopa all started melting. I realized that the early stages, the CO2, the dirt had quit its rapid breakdown process. The CO2 levels started dropping, and these plants were struggling without it. Yeah. I switched them to a type of hygrophila instead. Did amazing, because the hygrophila is able, instead of pulling as much carbon from CO2, it's able to do like Vallisneria is, and it's able to strip carbonates from the carbonate minerals in your water column. It's able to strip carbon. Things like Vallisneria, cryptocranes, Amazon sword, a few other plants, they are better at it. They're able to pull carbon from carbonates in your water. So like in my case, I have hard water. It works out perfectly for things like Vallisneria. It does amazing without CO2 or anything. It grows like a weed because it's getting its carbon.
CO2. I remember when I first dabbled with CO2, I think it was the yeast ones in the Coke bottle, and I'm talking that when I was like 12 or 15. And then after that, it would have been the very early 80s or whatever, when all that Optimum Aquarium and Duplo and all that stuff kind of hit the scene. And CO2, I'd never really even considered it before then. Even everybody I knew, even the old timers that kept, gorgeous planted tanks, all did the homemade yeast stuff. But once I went to that powered CO2 or the big bomb, it was no turning back after that. And now
I limit myself big time by not using it.
When we do that 75, it's going to have CO2.
Yeah.
I just got to be prepared for. I still remember the very first time I did. It was a corner 90-gallon tank, and I think it was you walked in the fish room, and there was there was a wall, and then there was the 4-foot wall of the big tank that was the wall of the basement. And it was an 800, 750, same size tank as that's at Spencer's shop. And you had to walk through that kind of hallway. And then at the end of that, there was a wall, but I had a spot to put in a corner-shaped aquarium. It was a plywood aquarium. It was a 90-gallon. And it was planted, and it was using a 250-watt metal halide spotlight.
Oh.
Back when we didn't care about electricity. And I remember planting that thing, and I was home all the time. I worked locally. I didn't travel as much, but
You could
it
have done
ended up
perfect.
being about 2 hours worth of gardening every single weekend. It
Oh
was
yeah.
insane. And I was using CO2 and my homemade manifold and everything. And that's all part of an upcoming video I got coming out for you guys. I dug through some of my old stuff and I found all these old things that I used to use, and they'd still work the same way today. It's just we were tinkerers, and that's what we did.
Metal halide light.
Yeah, metal halide light. The 750-gallon tank used to have actually 2 reclaimed Manitoba Hydro mercury vapor lamps on it. They actually had the whole street light hood, and I mounted them up to the ceiling on boards, and they worked awesome. They work like the way LED. You know how you get that ripple effect on the substrate?
Oh yeah.
LED, mercury vapor, metal halide, all those used to provide
that
that.
was what the reef keepers always used to use back in the day. Yeah.
Metal halide. Metal halide is bright white. Sodium vapor is bright orange. You see it in some of the old city lights in the Winnipeg there. That's great for bright white. Metal halide's good for growth for plants.
When I was
flowering, sodium encourages flowering. Mercury vapor is just odd, but it looked really good.
It creates really tight node spacing and really good vegetative growth.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a teenager, I took it was like an outdoor, like one of those motion sensor lights off a building, and I repurposed it to grow some garden plants.
Alternative crops.
Herbal.
It's like going towards the live feed that I saw last night. Next, we're going to start talking about poop fires.
Yeah.
That's where my lights went.
If you want to put poop in your tank, if you're putting poop in your tank, make sure it's worm poop.
Worm poop. Or, like, one thing I'd love to access, and it's going to sound weird asking for it, is if anybody knows where I can access bat guano earth. I want to find earth like substrate. I know there are companies that do work with it, but there's a like worm castings. There's one that's made with bat guano, and the reason I want that, it's totally not related to the subject at hand, but isopods. Any of the isopods that are the genera Cubaris, the rubber duckies and so forth, they're all limestone cave dwellers all over Asia, and their main diet isn't going to be leaf litter. They're not going to live on oak bark. They're going to live on limestone cave walls, very, very humid, with mineral-rich water dripping through the caves, and their diet is breaking down the organic matter on the floor of that cave, and that's going to be primarily bat poop. Yep. So I want to get that. I have ideas for. I have all these grandiose ideas in my plans of what I'd like to do if I can get some of these Cubaris species doing really, really well. That I could view them as, yeah, I could take a culture of these and kind of expendable, and let's see what they'll look like if we do this. But when you're looking at some of the prices on some of these Cubaris species, they're insane. Oh, I'd like to buy 5 of these small crustaceans from Vietnam. Here's $1,000. I'm like, are you insane? But some of them are worth it to some people, I guess. I don't know.
The only place I think you're going to find bat poop is at the hydroponic store, man.
Locally?
Yeah, check the hydroponic store.
I'm on a bat poop mission. There we go. Coffee's telling me hydroponic soil has plenty of bat-based soil. Nice.
Herbal gardeners. Those herbal gardeners really like that stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know. Where do you think of bats? Like anybody would harvest bats locally. You don't think of that locally. You know what I mean? Like, even in Canada, you don't think of that, right?
It'll be expensive, like boutique prices, though. It'll be like
they're all made of money. You know, like
it'll be like that green sand.
Money is no object. You know how this is. My wife is never going to watch this. You know, honey, if you are watching this, everything we said was lies. All that mud and everything like that mean Kyle made me buy.
Chris would never use your cheese grater on clay.
No, I would never do such things. No. I have a wife. I don't have my wife permission slip anymore. It got revoked.
I saw that. I'm sorry. Sorry for your loss.
I'll just make a new one. So, any last questions? I apologize to Mr. Wilson that we've kind of gone over our time. I'm not one to step on anybody's toes, and right now Jay doesn't have all his toes, so I don't want to step on them. Jay had a really bad accident falling down out of his attic of his new house and toward ligaments. He thought he broke his foot toward ligaments. He's in one of those big boot cast things, and he's been in absolute agony. So that's why he hasn't produced a lot of videos as of late, but he's still doing his live feeds. So
did he get kicked out of his attic by a Ninja Turtle?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, he's on right now. He's on. He always follows me. I follow. I go before him. So, what is green sand? One more thing. If you get the gentleman just asked, coffee asked, what is green sand?
Green sand. That's glauconite. It's a mineralized soil amendment. It's a fossilized layer that they mine from what previously were seabeds.
It's made super rich, and a very little goes a long way.
Yeah, it's very rich in potassium and iron. It's slow release. It's in a mineral form, so it's going to break down in the soil as the plant roots oxidize the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I thank you very much, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure. We looked at this tonight as kind of being, because of the situation globally right now, this is dipping a toe, so to speak, into dirted aquariums. And I think this is probably a topic that we'll probably have Kyle back, and that's probably a topic that we can expand on and maybe even go into other realms of fish keeping, because like almost all of your tanks are very, very naturally inspired. You don't set up carefully manicured, beautiful display tanks. Your tanks are beautiful naturally, and your fish have always thrived. And you choose the fish that you keep is a very eclectic mix of fish, and you're almost everything you get take in under your care thrives for you. And that's a testament to your skill level and your attention to detail. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
So with that, we will end it. Thank you, everyone, for a great night. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Everyone go watch Jay.
Yeah, let's go watch Jay. Thanks, Kyle.
Goodbye.